Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Lovers. I'm Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You might also know me as the editor-in-chief of Supply Chain Movement, European Quarterly. And also I'm the architect of the IT Subway Map. And we have a great webinar again. We will talk about artificial intelligence and cognitive automation. So we have a great couple of experts here. So you see me on the left. In the middle, you see Patrick Ditley. Patrick, hi.
Good afternoon. Nice to meet you, Martin.
Okay, hi. And next to him, we have Dan Mitchell, also of SAS Institute. Hi.
Hey there. Hey, thanks for having us today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. So both Patrick and Dan are experts in retail and CPG. And actually, you know, Patrick was a former supply chain executive. He worked for Matrix and Carey and Office Depot. So he's from the field, the supply chain field. And Dan has a lot of experience, especially with a customer in the denim manufacturing area, a well-known brand. And maybe we'll talk about it later. So again, to you all watching, this will be recorded. Everybody's on mute, but you can ask questions along the conversation we're going to have in the next 60 minutes. So either you can use the chat function on the right side, or you can click on the questions panel and ask questions. You know, if you ask questions through the chat, other attendees might answer these questions. And if you are using the question function, you know, you will see it there. And if there are a lot of questions, you can even vote for the questions. So there will be a Q&A at the end. But if the questions are in line of our conversation, I will pick it up and ask it to Patrick or Dan. After this hour, you know, we also have an after talk. So if you want to have one-on-one discussions with either Patrick or Dan, you can sit down in our lounge, and then you have kind of Zoom meeting with either Patrick or Dan, so you can talk further with them. All right. So why are we doing this webinar? You know, we have done a survey among 160 manufacturing companies and retail companies in Europe last June, and we asked what their investments are going to be in the next 12 months. So around this time, we saw, you know, sales and operations planning was very hot, but also prescriptive analytics is popping up. And what you see here is in like the orange bar is showing that the investment plans of more mature companies in supply chain matter, and the blue one is overall responses. And what is remarkable that, you know, the orange bars are, you know, slightly different from the others. So basically, the leading companies have the plans than the laggards or the rest. Patrick, what is your observation in this matter?
I would say, Martin, I can only reconfirm these results, what you have been assessing from different companies across Europe, particularly when you look a bit onto the lower level of details, that the orange bars, like the second box, which you have highlighted, prescriptive supply chain analytics, is something which has certainly been boosted from the COVID-19 pandemic, that there is a much bigger focus on there, that the value added in terms of leveraging analytics can be of much more creative and value added nature. And that is certainly something what we see also from different industries and from different continents as well.
Right. This is my favorite slide when I talk about analytics. Basically, you know, a few years ago, we talked a lot about big data. And if there is big data, there should also be small data. What is small data? That's internal structured data like ERP, WMS, TMS, API kind of stuff. And then you have unstructured data. That's your email. And then beyond, you go your external data with the social media. And, you know, to the left-hand side, companies are started with guessing. And then later on, it's reporting, looking back. And then they go into forecasting, and at the end, you know, they want to have a prescriptive analytics. My take is, you know, you have to crawl, then walk, and then run. So Dan, how do you look at this slide?
Yeah, you know, I would agree. You know, I think other thing that's important to the hood here is when it comes to mastering and getting your arms around data. At each step you take, you talk about crawl, walk, run. And I think you also need to up your game when it comes to the level of automation, right? Ingesting and getting your hands on the data and making it timely and live. You know, you don't want to be spending a lot of time doing that. You want to have as much of that as lights out as possible. because you do want to spend time looking at the quality of the data that's coming in, because you're always going to be chasing that. That's going to drift, going to move. And I think you also need to have enough time in your day to look out on the horizon for those new data sources. Those new data sources that are coming on the horizon, those are the things that are going to allow you to build those more sophisticated models that maybe your competition doesn't have.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later on. But first, Patrick, can you say something? Who is SAS for people who don't know it?
Absolutely. This is a bit of a chart which you, I'm sure, have seen from other parties and companies as well. But we take pride that, particularly from the retail and consumer goods side, that we have more than 1,200 customers worldwide, which we are proud to call our customers. 2 out of 3 retail companies which are part of the Fortune 500 have a SaaS solution or service in place in one form or another. The top 7 largest CPG companies, they use and rely on supply chain analytics solutions, supply chain in different facets. And as a matter of fact, you spoke about big data, small data. SAS has been founded 45 years ago when these terms like big data, small data probably were not even born yet. They were not even known yet. As a matter of fact, it started in the agriculture business. How can we assist farmers to create a bigger yield for their harvest? And that is basically how it all started 45 years ago. You see at the bottom a non-exhaustive list also of partners who we work together with. I'm sure you are familiar with them. Was it the NRF, the National Retail Federation, which is normally the largest event taking place in January. This is just to illustrate a bit partners we also work together with across the different customers we work together with.
All right. So let's talk about AI. So how big is the AI market? What are we talking about?
That's a good question, Martijn, and I would like to link it to a study which has been published recently by McKinsey. As a matter of fact, it is available in the public domain. There's a very interactive web page available where McKinsey says, how big is the artificial intelligence cake out there? And it's quite nicely broken down into industries and sub-industries, and it is, of course, also quantified how big is that cake. And you see here on that chart 3 industries explicitly called out. One is banking, then CPG, and retail. The message from that slide is we don't speak about billions anymore, we speak about trillions. And the second message is the CPG cake in terms of AI is 1.4 trillion, which is bigger than banking, which was first observation we made. And on top of CPG, the retail cake is even bigger, which is estimated about 1.7 trillion. That's also the reason why we say, hey, what do we and can we do from an AI perspective, from a cognitive automation perspective, use IoT, IIoT, ML, pick the different terms you want. What can be done to claim the slice of that cake, which we can harvest for our side? And that's also a bit the storyboard of what we wanted to bring in for today's webinar, that we will focus on CPG and retail. It doesn't mean that we don't work in banking as well, but that's, according to McKinsey, for the next 3 years where the music will play and the biggest cake is to be eaten.
And for example, Amazon is investing a lot in AI already, as we know. So that is, probably they have a large chunk of this AI investments. But going into the retail challenges. So Dan, what are the retail challenges nowadays, and how do you relate it to this topic?
Yeah, and I guess, when we say retail, consumer goods, for us, it's very synonymous. A lot of our customers actually, we have retail and consumer good companies working together in sharing data. And as you know, a lot of consumer goods companies are now moving to be more direct to consumer. So, a lot of the changes that, we've been seeing, and I think everyone has seen, chasing the customer preferences is, now something that you need to do every day. For a long time, we've been experimenting with different retail formats, but, I think as we see marketplaces really emerge, and then if you look at the big retailers who are now becoming marketplaces themselves, it is really a shifting sands of where to sell what and when. It used to be I'd kind of set up that strategy seasons ahead and plan for my next season. And I was talking to a colleague of mine. It's almost like are we now seasonless when it comes to how we're moving through retail? Should we get rid of the idea of operating cycles being seasonless? And that's been very disruptive. And then I think finally, a lot of the preparations that we did to really facilitate omni-channel, click and collect, being able to look at online inventory, having products delivered to home. When the pandemic hit, a lot of the people who are movers in that space were ready. And all at the same time, as we kind of come out of the pandemic and people start going back to some standard shopping trends, I think we will see people coming back to experiential shopping. How can I be more connected with my customer in store? And I think probably most important, for today in this audience is, what can we do to drive transparency in the supply chain? I mean, that is really paramount. And I do, I am concerned too that when it comes to these large data clouds and even collectives where we're working with partners, if we want to use the power of the cloud where everyone can get to the data at once, we need to be really on point with our privacy and make sure that it's not an afterthought. I think we've all seen missteps over the last decade when it comes to technology and how it's managed. And again, privacy will come back up. And more from an operational perspective, a resiliency perspective, I want to make sure that nothing in my, I can't afford an outage of a loyalty program. I mean, I can afford an outage of a loyalty program, but maybe not a transportation management system or a POS system or a warehouse management system. And I think we're very tempted to open up a lot of those data stores that we haven't. And I think we just need to be really cautious as we do that. Make sure that we're keeping privacy and security kind of in the front of our minds.
Yeah, we have done a study for our Trend Compass, our yearly Trend Compass, and one of the new upcoming innovation drivers is exactly what you're saying: is privacy and security. And especially when you look in the with a lot of Zoom meetings, Zoom had some issues. So privacy and security is a new innovation driver. So, but how do you relate it to analytics in the world of tomorrow?
I think when you look at teams that are looking to adopt analytics, they should consider all these great enablers out there that are there. And I think people now, in the last 3 years, I think we have our arms kind of firmly around artificial intelligence. We all have a pretty consistent definition. We may not be at the same skill level, but I think we've seen enough successful use cases. We've learned from people's missteps. So I think from that perspective, we're in a good place. There's a great pipeline for skills that are out there now for AI and analytics. Patrick showed on one of the previous slides our work with NRF. Well, some of that work is actually with the NRF Foundation, which is the educational body of NRF. It's a nonprofit that actually entices workers to the retail and consumer goods sector by getting the good word out about what great jobs are available and what great careers. And we've seen quite a bit of interest for learners and curriculum around AI in the retail and consumer goods space. And I think the good thing is, my previous experience in retail is anytime you had a good data scientist or analytics person, another industry would come along and poach that person, and they'd go off working for a telco. I think now retail AI is so mainstream in retail that there are some fantastic job careers to be had. So, looking at all those capabilities and automation around workflow, what can be done in the cloud. Now analytics are not a static ad hoc thing, but it's something that you can build a model and put it on an edge server or put it in the store and then basically intelligence into the store, make it smarter. So a lot of projects and activity around digitizing the store, whether it's the physical or the virtual store, or even doing digital twins, and looking at those outcomes. How can I unify that customer experience? What can I do on the supply chain side of the house? And what can I do to invest in more modern thinking applications that will actually take some next steps for me, make my job easier as a merchandiser, as a supply chain analyst. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that we've seen around more cognitive applications like you're mentioning in the kickoff of the session.
Yeah, and and what kind of overview do you need as a planner? Because in sales and operations planning is about demand planning and supply planning. So how does it relate to your world in AI?
I think on a couple of sides. One is and I hit on this earlier, is that let's make sure that we're investing as much as possible in the automation of the data ingestion. That should not be a demand planner's problem. Secondarily, they should never have to worry about the quality of the data. And then even the people who are operating the system for us, they need to make this as lights out as possible. And when something does go wrong, that they are alerted to it. So it's important, like you see here on the left-hand side here, that you have a set of data services that are dedicated to bringing in external data sources and internal data sources, so sales, inventory, shipment data. But as you bring on these new modern data sources, whether it's from IoT or computer vision, again, how can you automate that? And more importantly, inside of that, automating some data quality alerts. You can use statistics just to do health checks on that data that's coming in every day, every week. What's the mean, mode, standard deviation? What are some outlier detections? You can put up some safeguards to check that data for you, so it doesn't wind up being a massive investment. It's just it's a good discipline. And once you have that, then if you basically, we help our customers put in place a predictive plan demand platform that allows us to plug in analytic models from SAS, from Python, from R. And every day when you want to create a new inventory forecast, a new inventory optimization, or a new sales forecast, we're using our existing models. We're regenerating that demand signal for you. If we see the models drifting a little bit, we will try to correct it. We'll try to use, you may have 3 or 4 different models. We'll actually have a champion and challenger and see which one's the best and suggest to you which one's the best. And then when the model does finally maybe drift to a point where it's not going to work lights out, we can't self-tune it, we will alert you to fixing that. And so again, it's a really important thing that, yes, SAS has analytic models, but we can help you manage all of your analytic models across that whole enterprise. It's a key important viewpoint to have, because even in both small and big organizations, people might use different analytics technology for different parts of the business, different product lines, different geographies, different regions. At some point, it's important to have a holistic view of that. I guess lastly, and just a couple things that, I've learned that are really important, that I think most people on the call would agree, is you need to have a consistent way across your organization to monitor accuracy. We all need to agree what accurate is. And, Patrick can't have a different version of that metric than I. And then also, and we'll dig into this a bit deeper, when it comes to developing a sales and operations plan, a merchandise and assortment plan, a financial plan, a supply chain plan, people are making changes, and we need to track those things. So making sure that we automate all of the creation of the demand signal, and then making sure that we're delivering it into the right operational system, plugging it into your ERP system, replenishment system, and making sure that they're using that demand signal. Because if they choose not to use it and then use something different, we don't have that reinforcement learning loop where we can strive to get better and learn from our mistakes. So, it's really important to do that. And, we even find ourselves often, we have a front end where you can do end-to-end demand planning, but sometimes the SaaS engine is actually on the back end, and we're plugging into the ERP system. So whether it's SAP, Blue Yonder, JDA, whoever it might be, or even just Excel, we're often creating those demand signals and then handing those to those external systems.
So the role of the planner will change in the sense that, he or she will look at the algorithms, what's working for your product group, and how does it compare to other product groups. So in that sense, the work of the planner will change, not so much forecasting or creating the forecast themselves, but what is working for them, for their product group.
Yeah, ideally, this picture here, they should see it once, and it takes care of everything, and they never worry about it again. And then, I'll touch on this a little bit later, but really for the planner of the future, we need to reallocate where they're spending their time, hours and minutes every day. And we have some pretty sophisticated techniques to do that. So, I think that's really the big game, is looking at how we're spending time today and reinventing that. What is the demand planner workflow in the future?
So let's talk about omnichannel. So you mentioned that's a huge trend, and that will change the retail and CPG world. So what is the impact of the omnichannel for the planning environment?
I think, and yes, any organization now is omnichannel, right? So I'm not in any way prescribing thou shall be omnichannel. If thou is not omnichannel, they is probably not in business anymore. But I think it's important to look at omnichannel, what I call omnichannel analytics, which is, well, across all of my business, we have many different departments and silos, all responsible for the customer, all holding a piece of data about the customer or about the product or about how the product is being fulfilled to them. And we really need to have in place the systems and the mindset to share that. And so, yes, there's a technology piece of that. That's important. It's consistent data management, consistent demand management that I just talked about, using, at least having analytics and artificial intelligence available to all of us. But, where I've seen some major unlocks in organizations is a really kind of subtle thing where we build an analytic model, and then all of a sudden different teams and departments come together to use that. So let's just say when the merchandising and the marketing teams actually build something simple like customer segmentation models and actually share them and make decisions based on that same exact analytic, and then they learn something good or bad and come back and enhance it, each one benefits from it. And so obviously there's a parity, great parity unlock that happens, right? If you're in marketing and you're driving a personalization engine, and I'm in merchandising and I'm making a localized assortment decisions, if we use the same customer segmentation algorithm and we're assorting, then hopefully the customer gets a very consistent experience. That's awesome. That's a great outcome. But there's this great virtuous circle opens up where now you and I are very invested in each other's success. And you on the marketing side might come to me, Dan, and say, hey, we need to add more of this data into the customer segmentation model. And I'm like, hey, great, I've never seen that data. Thank you very much. Look at it. So I think, omnichannel analytics to me is those departments sharing those analytic models in their individual decisions and then enhancing it.
Yeah, that's quite clear. Well, in the title of this webinar, we are making intelligent automation. So can you explain what it is and how it reflects on this business?
Sure. Intelligent automation, was a term that, I don't know if myself, my colleague invented, but, we were looking a lot on what we heard. Everyone was very interested in robotic process automation. And I think most people on this call are familiar with that. It's, you take an existing workflow and can you use a rules-based system to either instrument a workflow or an application, and then, automate it so that it drives out error. It lets you tackle a larger scope. It might let you tackle more sophisticated things than you were able to do before. For us, intelligent automation was sort of when you hit to that tipping point where what you're trying to automate is so complex that a rules-based system for robotic process automation could really never sustain for a long period of time. Anything, that where we're getting new data, new shifting shopping patterns of customers, radical shifts in our supply chain where, only in the past human operators could make a decision and react to the outside world. That's the kind of scope of problem that, we deemed intelligent automation and really required analytics to kind of look at all possible, solutions, and then using some business constraints, give you a recommendation on the outcome. Again, something a robotic process mindset can take you, a certain distance, but not beyond that. And and think of this in talking to some customers. They ask me like, well, what have you done with Teams, and what works and doesn't work, and where's the opportunity? And I've listed some opportunities here. I think some of them are pretty obvious around data collection. There's a lot. There's a huge space for us to get a lot smarter in that space. Around security, now that the digital surface of our enterprise is so broad and dynamic that you really need systems to adapt to that. But then all the way into accounting, scheduling, marketing, there's a huge opportunity out there. And, some of the criteria I use to gauge whether it's ready for intelligent automation, I look at the process. Is it an institutionalized process? If I'm going to automate something for the whole enterprise and build a brain that can do that in a way for us that we trust, we all need to agree on the business process. It can't just be something Dan's department uses and no one else. We all need to buy in on that. It is the business process. And then I think we have to have a shared goal of, we need to agree. Our lives would be better if we made this easier. It'd be better if it was more accurate. And then, quantifiable measures and metrics. And then, really getting together business and analytic teams so that we both agree, yes, let's make a change. If one wants to make the change, if the analytics team wants to run into the future and the business team doesn't want to change their existing process, it'll be a failure. And then, I won't go through all the technology here, but I think when you're looking at applications where you want to do intelligent automation, it's important that they have criteria that allows you to instrument, basically, imagine the existing application and you want to bolt on an agent or a brain to it that's going to run some of the processes. You need to be able to measure it and instrument what's happening in the application easily. And then you need APIs to almost orchestrate and mimic, what a human operator would be doing if you're going to put in place a more cognitive application.
Yeah. So my take is, robotic process automation is like, automate static retyping from your EP system to another system, but it's not dynamic. And in this world, you need some dynamics.
Right.
Patrick, but how can you apply intelligent automation in an omnichannel world?
Look, fact is that intelligent automation is simply a huge accelerator to manage and simply successfully orchestrate your omnichannel tasks. And over the next couple of slides, I would like to maybe be a bit illustrative and share an example to how we did so. If you go to the middle piece here of that slide on the right hand side, you see 3 arrows down like react fast and effectively, which you may say, yes, of course, that I have heard already 7 million times before. But as a matter of fact, we would like to share with you what we started last year when we were going into the first wave of the pandemic. And we, at that moment in time, believed this may be a one-time exercise and learned along the way, hey, you know what? As we go along into the second, even into the third wave, it becomes a repetitive exercise. And every wave we basically manage, the further we can further improve the offering. The middle one, automate intelligent, also based on an example which then Dan walk us through. How exactly could we apply that? Where did we do that along the different tasks of the supply chain? What results did it deliver, and so on? And ultimately, in the spirit of continuous improvement, continue driving stability in that it's a learning loop, as you were referring to in an earlier stage, Dan, that we can continue adjusting it as we go along. At the end of the day, it simply doesn't only help to manage and successfully orchestrate the different tasks from the omnichannel dimension. It just helps to continue augmenting the supply chain excellence, where we see itself manifesting in a higher service level and higher profitability. And speaking about profitability, by the way, last year, supply chain was not only key, it remains also key this year, where a lot of retailers, but also consumer goods companies, they have experienced an increase in their top line, but they did not necessarily see an increase in their profit and their margin, because it came along with incremental costs, particularly freight costs, delivery costs, which were not planned or budgeted before, where intelligent automation can help as well.
All right, clear. So let's get into some examples. So in the retail and CPG environment, can you give me an example of a challenge?
Absolutely. So starting point is, look, what was the challenge we basically faced? And you have here the 3 bottoms below. Once we got into the first wave, there was I wouldn't call it a type of panic exercise, but we realized, hey, we need to react immediately. We need to react immediately because our forecasts were upside down. We wanted to understand what is going on. We wanted to stabilize it and to make sure with the first touch of the stabilization, what are the implications of the supply network plan, of production planning, down to the fulfillment itself, and so on and so forth. We then basically said, so how can we improve these forecast signals as we believe we get somewhat out of the first period of that disruptive event, but we learned then it was just a valley in between two waves, in order to thirdly prepare for the new normal. For the new normal, which at this moment in time we believed, how can we plan for these shifts in demand and changes to overcome in the long term that this event has subsided.
So, and what are the solutions for all this, for these three, stages?
The result was the solution we basically had. So we need indeed to react. We need to react rapidly, but we should not just, react rapidly by doing something. We should do something intelligently. And as a matter of what I would like to illustrate afterwards, today's technological means with AI and also particularly cognitive automation enable us to work with a so-called ensemble model, where we do not only take internal data into account, but the key differentiator was that we take external data into account, external causal factors which answer the question, why did that happen? And we did so also from a technology point of view, deploy them in a cloud-based environment, of course, in Azure, in that particular case, to that. Secondly, prepare for the recovery, include the known events like calendar events or external variable into models, external variables where at a certain moment we believe there are still some motions taking place, but many of the retail and consumer good companies, they massively reduced the magnitude and the frequency of their promotional events, but also saying, what can we do to start thinking about first what if scenarios? What if there is no new normal, there is a second wave or a third wave, or what if the vaccinations will take longer? What if we don't know when the vaccinations will be released, and so on and so forth. In order to go to the third one, plan for the new normal and permanently enrich or enhance these forecast models based on these additional information and complete the implications in a sophisticated, augmented way.
So what are examples of external causal factors and these external variables to use as extra internal data?
There are different data sets from the external side, and I would like to start this way, and I think we have a slide on that as well, Martijn. A lot of companies, they're still working what I would call in a linear way. They take their internal data sets, what you can see on the left-hand side, sales historical data, or inventory levels, promo data, pricing data, and so on and so forth. This is still good, but if the pandemic has shown us once what we need to do, then these data are good, but they're not good enough anymore. By adding additional data sets, like external data sets, like of course starting with the COVID-19 statistics, number of cases, R0 factors, and so on and so forth. These are one of the first data sets we've taken into account. Economic indicators, stringency index data, for example, certain countries, they basically recovered quicker than others. How do you reflect that? How do you reflect that also in terms of exchange rates? Social media data. Social media data was probably one of the bigger differentiators. What people posting in their LinkedIn, in their Facebook, in their Twitter posts? What are the terms they actually use there? What do they hashtag with? To give you an example here from the second wave from Canada, here in the province of Quebec, there was a beer company, and they figured out with our help, women have posted much more the terms of their flavored beer preference. And suddenly, in certain regions, we had a boom of shelf offtake for certain beer flavors, which we were not be able to explain beforehand if we hadn't had that insight It coming from certain posts on social media data, which this specific beer company, brewery, was able to proactively steer. What does that mean going forward? What can we do from a dispatching, from a shipment point of view, from a replenishment point of view, that we can continue serving that demand? Whereas other regions, which was not impacted, we continue serving differently. Things like these. Competitor promo data, pricing data, what is available, that is another enrichment which has been factored in. Market trends data, just to mention another one. Those are just a few external data sets which have been factored into it to respond to that demand signal, which ultimately had a big impact further down the supply chain to make sure the service level can be kept. And it was not just business continuity, it was actively steering it.
So in the last few years, before pandemic, we talk about the weather data as external data set and that kind of thing. But with the pandemic, borders were closing. You saw different paces of how governments reacted, but also how retailers and CPG companies reacted to move to other products or lessen the number of promotions. So that also will change, and maybe within the new normal, the usual promotional calendar will change, maybe permanently.
Most likely, and weather data, the fact that it's not here on the list doesn't mean we drop it. There are additional data sets which of course are out there as available and could and should be factored in depending of if there is a need. If you have a big seasonality pattern where there is an impact by weather, then let's please factor that in. If you believe that is of less applicability, then let's talk about that, and maybe let's not give that a focus area. The point here is the model has been massively enhanced by taking external data sets into account, which proved to be the differentiator to really make sure that the demand signal which you inject into the different tasks of the supply chain made a huge difference.
The question might be how easy is it to get this external data on a regular basis?
It depends on how frequent these data are being published, but today's technological means enable you to suck in these data in whatever format, alphanumeric, visual, you name it, into these models that you can process these data. It doesn't mean that we need to have a lot of, and that's exactly the value added of cognitive automation, that you can automate these tasks, which in the past required manual action, that you can automate them in an intelligent way, that what data do I want and need to include into this model, that I can distill some intelligence out of it.
So you have an example of a grocery retail company. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, and the chart is maybe a bit small to read, and it's not the goal to basically read all of that. But as a matter of fact, we'd worked with a direct-to-consumer grocery retail business. And as Dan Razaray mentioned, the direct-to-consumer is certainly one of the fulfillment channels which has continued to grow. By taking these external data sets into account, above and beyond the usual internal data set, combining that with a so-called ensemble model, where we do not only take one type of model, one type of algorithm, but we combine it. We were basically saying, look, by combining them, moving from forecast accuracy, which we had at the beginning of about 78%, we're able to boost it up to above 90%. Above 90%, which was really making the difference, because many retailer, consumer goods companies out there, we are always a bit dancing around the 80% threshold, but what needed to be done to really push it above 90% level? These external data sets with an ensemble model in a machine learning and cognitive automation piece enabled us in that specific case to boost it by more than 12% and go above a 91%, with the consequences that from a service level, from a continuing serving the customer level, really made the difference in that customer case here.
So how does this ensemble model look like?
Well, it's a noisy chart and probably requires more, but it is a combination of different models, where you have a naive model, if you wish. You can have time series based, which you basically have here also indicated in one of the strings. You can have combined that with machine learning intelligence as well, combining that with open source, and you basically take the timing models and things like these, and you continue tuning it on the highest level. You basically take the different elements, you combine these into a model which helps you on an overall base to improve not only forecast accuracy but the supply chain as such. That would probably require a bit more time here, but this is just for illustrative purposes. An ensemble model takes different approaches into account, combines that in a smart way to get there what we're ultimately aiming for.
But if you compare to 20 years ago, you had a black box and you didn't know what this engine, this algorithm was doing. but now you're opening it up and you show maybe it's still complex. And you need to have an operations research background to understand it. But then again, it's not as a black box anymore like it used to be.
It is not a black box anymore. And speaking about operations research, Martijn, that is what we have in common. And we both studied that. And that's therefore the language we speak. That's where we get our passion and our energy from. But unbundling or opening up that black box and say, how does an Eve model work with a time series based model? And we basically weight it, or we do that on the product categories, we do that on different geographical areas. That's exactly, those are the screws, these are the levers you can turn to fine tune it. And you break off the black box, you take the different pieces out, and you arrange them in the way which needs to be arranged.
Well, let's get into the area of demand planning. So Dan, you have also mentioned a forecast value. Maybe you can get into that, and we talk about the role of the demand planner for the future.
Sure. Just listening to what Patrick was just saying, I think it's important to kind of just reflect back on what you were just talking about when it comes to ensemble modeling. That's all. It's not a black box, but what's new there is all that's being automated for me. So, that's kind of an unsung hero of automation that hopefully it just works for me, does everything for me. That would have taken me years of months to do it by hand. Then even upstream, we're talking about pulling that data together. If you're using a machine learning algorithm or something that is at least monitoring accuracy, that's automated for you. That would have been something you would have to done by hand in the past. And then even, we have a lot of customers who use advanced analytic techniques to merge and blend data. A classic example of that is if I'm, a consumer goods company, and from some of my retailers, I only get receipts, and other ones I get POS data. I may want to try to blend all these data sets together across, many different hierarchies and have it automatically try to fill in some of the blanks for us. So, I'm going to give an example here of, more sophisticated AI, but I would encourage people to think about the unsung heroes here of automation, where we set these things up and they're very adaptable for us. Kind of turning that corner, and just like you were saying, when talking about those levels of sophistication of analytics, when I think about applications for AI, you talk about cognitive. A lot of us, when you hear cognitive, you think about either voice or computer vision, where a machine can learn it can do something for me based on I'm asking it something, and that's absolutely a huge piece of AI that we need to basically extract data from computers. But there's this other angle, which is what can the computer learn from us as operators? Mm-hmm. And, as I mentioned, really important to any demand planning process, probably the biggest paradigm when it comes to developing a forecast is, are people using it? Someone told me the best forecast is the one we actually use. Well, hopefully it's a good forecast. The thing that does happen, as we all know, is we take a forecast and we make adjustments for it. We make adjustments because maybe the system is out of date with data. We make adjustments because there's some intelligence out there in the world that it doesn't know, or we make adjustments because of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so we very much prescribe, adopting what we call forecast value add, which is a metric you use to track your demand planning process. Takes the historical data, a baseline, naive forecasts, a more enriched statistical forecast with ensemble models like Patrick mentioned, and then also captures the overrides. So when someone touches the forecast, we want to collect every time that happens and learn from it. Maybe we need to be better at developing a demand signal. Maybe we need to add more data, or maybe we just need to be aware of some process downstream that's happening. And that's where we kind of can start to turn the corner towards this more sophisticated automation.
So how does machine learning play a role in this forecast value add?
Yeah, so I just want to touch on this first, is that when you look at intelligent automation, what we're talking about doing is connecting onto our existing demand planning process and system, a common set of rules that can be run and optimized in real time using machine learning, a really sophisticated model that can look at what the demand planners are doing, can look at the baseline forecast and start to learn from it. Now, instantly this strikes fear into people's hearts. One, me being just tracked by metrics and goals, it puts a lot of fear into folks' mind. But then the fear is, well, this is trying to replace me as the demand planner. And the truth can't be, more than the opposite of that, as demand planners, we have such few amount of time in the day to get done, to apply our attention to high value work. And we're down operating on levels that really aren't bringing our best intelligence, where we're maybe putting in a high level forecast and making an adjustment for it. We're spending time, seeding and initializing sales data and working on it. And really what we should be spending our time is being directed to parts of the supply chain where we don't have enough data, we don't have the best analytic model. And so what we're really doing is trying to use analytics and machine learning to learn what's happening, both from a customer perspective, supply chain perspective, the demand planner's perspective, and then when it comes to when we come to take action, that the demand planner is actually guided right to the place where they need to spend their attention. So again, the ultimate goal is not to replace anyone or any process, any sets of processes. It's really to enrich them and to make them more focused. And I'll show you a good example of that here in a second.
Yeah. Yes. So demand planning and forecasting is also a chain of processes, and some parts will change and will be enhanced by automation.
Yeah, and this is what I was just talking about here, right? And this is pretty straightforward. Everybody on the call will recognize this, that we're automating the forecasting. Patrick talked the historical data. Patrick talked about how our forecasting engines can hopefully do everything for us, so we don't need to spend any of our time and effort on that. But then there's that part of the process that will always be there, where we're asking the demand planner to produce overrides. And obviously a big example that we all deal with every day is going into different geographies, changes in product lines, or adding whole new products. Those are the places where we need human intervention, and those are the places where sometimes those problems are so complex and multidimensional, but we expect that a demand planner can go tackle this mega spreadsheet with millions and millions of rows at the bottom level of the leaves of these things. Expect they can spend time to see everything, and they can't. And so what we're trying to do is really help better manage that override process and learn from it.
So here an excellent example on individual planners level how to measure this forecast value add.
Yes. Yeah, and so here's a good example of it, right? So by this forecast value add, and we have different planners here, Mary, Jay, Pam, David, John, they're all responsible for different parts of the business. And what we do is we take that historical sales, the forecast, the actual, and the overrides, and we measure that. That is forecast value add score, and we collect that. So it could very well be that one planner's overrides are more accurate than others, but I think it's important to realize life's not always that simple. John might have a really difficult category, platform, region to manage, and what's on his plate is a lot more than another demand planner. So this gives us a way to measure that and then collect all these overrides.
But it's not a matter of an American way in or out as a replacement overview.
No, not at all, not at all. And it also, sometimes it's a reflection of the analytics model, or maybe the data maybe sent us askew. You know, as humans, you know, we're susceptible to seeing a spike and assuming it's a trend, right?
But, yeah, but then again, it's good to have these figures of forecast value add, to discuss openly among your planners. How are we doing, and how are we using the system, and how complex is it, and how complex is the market?
And maybe our process is guilty the offender here, right?
Yeah.
Maybe for this area we're not following the standard process, or again, as I mentioned, maybe data is the guilty offender, and that actually means we need to invest in data for John's area of the business.
Yeah, and some areas, some categories might be more difficult, and maybe the early life cycle changing, because of the pandemic, etc.
Yeah.
So,
and you need to have a holistic view too, because staff come and go, right?
Yeah.
And so, what's after John leaves, someone else gets handed this, and maybe they have the same struggles, or maybe they have different struggles.
So how can you improve this?
Yeah. So, what we've done is actually, and if you just hit one more build on this, if you see, we've actually taken that forecast value add metric and measurement, and again, we're collecting all of the touches where someone's overriding the plan, and we're taking that and tagging it for each level of, the hierarchy of time, location, supply chain, product attribute, what have you. Every time that touch happens and we've measured whether it had a positive or negative outcome, we take that, we feed it into a machine learning algorithm that tries to then measure, basically replicate that activity and behavior, understanding what the good outcomes were. And then we bolt that back onto the system as an agent. So when I come in, next time around, it's going to suggest to me a plan and really guide me towards where I can, if I'm going to change the forecast, where is it okay to change the forecast, and give me some guardrails to do that. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side house, maybe there are some areas that we want to just tell the demand planner, I'm sorry, we're not, based on the process, we strongly recommend that you do not make any overrides. And the important thing here is see that by doing this automation, yes, we're increasing the accuracy. That's a wonderful thing. We've done this with several companies, retail, consumer goods. Any small increase in accuracy, could be up to 1 to 2%, benefit when it comes to inventory safety stock. But I think the other important thing is the lower bar here, that we're actually measured in reducing the number of product touches. So places in your demand plan where you need to go touch the plan. And, we're reducing that effort by giving them a very guided and prescriptive set of recommendations of what to touch and what not to touch, and the guardrails to do that. And inherently, we're shifting their time to more higher value activities inside of the demand planning system. And the really awesome thing about this is, we're opening up this reinforcement learning, right? We're going to get better and better at this every time. The agents are going to learn, the models and the agents are going to learn more and more. And then we can then spend our time with, reacting to the things we've never seen before.
It's quite interesting, because of course, when we talk about supply chain software and automation and planning, we talk about the customers, consumers, and forecast accuracy. But now good to see that we also talk about the planners and have an overview of what's happening to the planners and how more effective they get, how more time they can spend on more intelligent work, I would say.
Right, and just think human nature. If you're handed a large set to solve for, you only have so much time in a day, so you might be very tempted to try to fix things at a high level of the hierarchy, in the plan, and try to get as accurate as possible. And then inherently, we kind of either physically or mentally all hit the disaggregate button and push data down to the bottom. Think of what we're doing here is I'm saying, no, don't do that. I really don't want you to spend time at all. I'm going to guide you down to the lowest level of the plan where you need to make the touches. And so that the net effect is a huge accuracy boost, because it's those places where you should have touched that you didn't because you were kind of in this disaggregate mode that really makes the big difference and moves the needle to increase your accuracy, above and beyond, what your competition can do. And just a last point here, it's just very important that, when we're looking at these processes, we're looking at AI and all this cool stuff, we need to make sure it's delivered right to the desktop. It needs to be native to my planning process. I shouldn't have to go to another meeting or bring up another screen or run another thing. Ideally, hey, Dan, Patrick, make my plan smarter. That's what I really care about. And you can see here, this is just an example of that, a demand plan where, we're basically just putting up yellow, green, or white in grid, telling them where they should make changes, where they shouldn't make changes, and giving them some guardrails to stay inside of.
Yeah. Especially in the last year, with COVID-19, planners working out of home, and maybe they don't have the opportunity to go to each other's desk, that kind of stuff. So that will change, or will have been changed indefinitely. That this kind of tools will be needed. Also, in the future, that the planners might, work for 1 or 2 days out of home and the rest in the office. So this has to be the new normal to have assisted demand planning.
Yeah, the thing I'm excited about too, you might have, I've alluded to it a little bit, to really move towards agile planning. We're very season cycle focused. Obviously, through the last year, we rapidly accelerated our planning cycles. We planned more frequently and made adjustments. Hopefully, using this kind of technology brings less stress and chaos to accelerate more agile demand planning. Right? If Dan's giving me back, 50% of my time, then I can probably tackle some more planning cycles. Whereas, if I don't have this kind of capability, I'm just asked to do more with the same amount of time.
All right, thanks, Dan. You were almost out of time. So, Patrick, a short summary, and might have some 1 or 2 questions, and then
definitely
wrap it up.
Yeah. Look, when we speak about artificial intelligence, when we speak about cognitive automation, we have today's technological means enable us to use them and simply consider them as a huge accelerator for orchestrating everything what is related to omnichannel. And we try to illustrate that a bit based on 2 examples with an ensemble model linked to the COVID-19 pandemic and the forecast accuracy increase. Then you're talking about assisted demand planning. And, there will be other examples. We focus today on demand planning forecasting, which we could do on more related to inventory management, even returns, you name it. The point we try to bring across is not only to illustrate that, but there is another word which we haven't touched, and I deliberately kept to the very end, and it is trust. When you speak about artificial intelligence, when you speak about cognitive automation, the user needs to start learning how to trust what AI and cognitive automation wants to tell you, that intelligent automation indeed is unburdening you from manual tasks. And whenever we speak about trust in the forecast value add, let's take maybe some facts and figures as well to show what the system tells you in addition or in parallel to what you as a good planner tried to do. By taking these examples, the planner, the user can start trusting also what the intelligent automation means are able to teach you, take by your hand, or free up time. And that is something which needs to be built well. And with these means, that trust can be built, can be enhanced, can basically be built on. That's what we wanted to bring along for today, and that brings us pretty much to the top of the hour where we wanted to be more time.
Yeah. There are some questions, but I would suggest, let's go into the lounge straight after this. So basically, you can click on the orange button on top of the screen after when I pause the presentation. So thank you for your questions. I would suggest ask them directly to Patrick or Dan. It's about demand sensing and about how the workday of a planner would look like in the forecast with AI. We have some more resources for further reading. On the left side, you see the IT subway map. There's a lot of information about all kinds of supply chain software vendors and their applications. And on the right-hand side, you see some excellent resources by SAS Institute. Also, you have a toolkit by Laura Cesare I can recommend. We will have our not next Wednesday, but in 2 weeks' time. First, I would like to thank Patrick and Dan for their explanation and an interesting conversation. So, Patrick, Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I would like to thank you all for listening. And either, I will see you in 2 weeks' time in the next webinar on Webinar Wednesday, or I will see you right away, right after this in the lounge. But either way, thank you, and I will see you later. And we will go into lounge right after this. And thank you, and see you later once again. Thank you. Bye-bye.